The cancer was already in its final stage. The doctor told me, gently but firmly, that I should try not to leave behind any regrets. In that moment, my mind emptied of everything except one person, the man who had vanished from my life 10 years ago. I started dialing his number over and over again, a number that should have been disconnected long ago, my fingers shaking as if muscle memory alone was keeping it alive. "I'm dying, Aiden," I said when the call finally went through. "Can you come see me? Just once." On the other end of the line, there was nothing. No breath, no reaction, no sign that my words had landed anywhere at all. The silence was so complete it felt deliberate. My throat tightened, and before I could stop myself, I was begging. "Please, can you stay with me for a little while? Just 3 days. That's all I'm asking. I'm begging you. Say something, Aiden, please. Just talk to me." The line went dead. I collapsed back onto the couch, every drop of strength drained from my body, and sat there in a kind of hollow stupor until dawn broke. It felt like being left out in the sun without water, slow, quiet, and utterly hopeless. Seattle's rain came without warning. A violent downpour slammed against the windows, the wind howling like it was trying to tear the building apart. Then, through the storm, the doorbell rang. I shot up and rushed toward the door. I moved too fast. The bottle of painkillers on the table tipped over, pills scattering across the floor, bouncing and rolling in every direction. When I opened the door, there was only a delivery man standing there, clutching a thin folder. He took one look at me, pale, disheveled, clearly sick, and the irritation on his face froze. His eyes widened, and he started to stammer. Hello ma'am, your delivery." He set the package down, turned around, and practically ran down the hallway, as if he'd just seen something unnatural. I let out a short, bitter laugh and stared at the now empty corridor. In weather like this, who would knock on my door except people who had no choice but to be out there, working to survive? I bent down to pick up the package. That was when I heard it. Drip, drip. The sound of water hitting the floor. Slowly, I turned around. Aiden was standing at the far end of the hallway, completely soaked. Rainwater dripped from his hair, his coat, his sleeves, pooling silently beneath his feet. Outside, the storm raged on, and for a split second, a tired old cliché surfaced in my mind. If someone truly loves you, they'll cross half a continent through a storm just to see you. And he had come. Did that mean that somewhere deep inside him, there was still a place for me? That fragile hope shattered the moment he spoke. "Lynn," he said, his voice flat and distant, "we've been divorced for 10 years. I think it's time you grew up and stopped interfering with my life." 10 years apart, and that cold, unfamiliar tone was enough to snap the last thread holding me together. I rushed toward him, reaching for the sleeve of his rain-soaked shirt, desperate to grab onto something, anything. "Why did you leave so cleanly? Why did you disappear like a coward for 10 entire years?" But before I could force the words out, tears spilled over. My voice broke apart, and all that came out was a hysterical, broken repetition. "How could you do this to me? How could you?" His face, still handsome, still painfully familiar, didn't change at all. "Lynn," he said calmly, "calm down." At that moment, the electronic lock across the hall chirped to life. "Incorrect password. Please try again." The neighbor cracked her door open, peering out nervously, clearly having heard the argument. I wiped my tears away as quickly as I could and forced a professional, practiced smile onto my face. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "We disturbed you." Her face went even paler. Her hands shook as she entered the correct code, and the door slammed shut behind her with a heavy thud. The hallway fell silent again. Aiden looked at me, exhaustion finally breaking through his composure. He let out a long sigh. "Let's go inside," he said. He turned sideways and squeezed through the doorway, dragging a rush of cold, damp air in with him. This small 2-bedroom apartment was something we had bought together back then. Every fixture, every piece of furniture had been chosen to match the minimalist style that was popular at the time. For 10 years, I hadn't moved a single thing. Seen through today's eyes, it all looked outdated, stale, lifeless, like a space frozen in time. Aiden stopped at the entryway without taking off his shoes. The living room was cluttered with things I hadn't had the energy to sort through. The air felt heavy, worn down, defeated, exactly like me. He frowned, and for a fleeting second, I thought he might feel a trace of sympathy. But when he spoke again, His voice was just as cold as before. "Lynn, stop harassing me. We're adults. Can't we give each other some dignity and space?" "No." I looked up at him, a smile curling on my face, sharp, almost cruel. "I'm dying, Aiden. Dead people don't need dignity." It had started as an occasional stabbing pain in my upper abdomen. I didn't take it seriously. I told myself it was just stress, maybe gastritis. Something I could endure and push through. Over time, I got used to the dull ache. The same way I'd gotten used to falling asleep alone, night after night, without him. Until one afternoon, with no warning at all, I collapsed at my desk. When I came to, my nose was filled with the harsh smell of disinfectant. My coworkers had rushed me to the ER, then hurried back to their meeting. After that, I was on my own, shuffling between one examination room and another. By the time it was finally my turn for a consultation, the outpatient doctor was getting ready to leave for the day. Earlier, he'd been curt and impatient, clearly in a rush. But when he saw my test results, his entire demeanor changed. He became unusually gentle. He even poured me a cup of warm water himself. The exam room was terrifyingly quiet. The only sound was the distant honking of traffic outside the window. One look at the way they were watching me, and I already knew the answer. Cancer. Strangely enough, hearing that word didn't break me. Instead, I felt lighter than I had in years. Like a long prison sentence had finally ended, like I could finally hand in my paper and be done. I followed their advice and checked myself into the hospital. Then I started a video call in the family group chat. I tried to keep my voice steady as I told them I was sick, that I'd been hospitalized, that they should all schedule checkups too. That night is a blur, my mother's sobbing, my sister's quiet crying, and my younger brother's long unbearable silence. What followed were endless days of chemotherapy, biopsies, and side effects that never seemed to stop. Vomiting. Hair loss. Even losing control of my body. Whatever dignity I had left was stripped away piece by piece. The face in the mirror grew more hollow with each passing day. At first, my hospital room was filled with flowers and fruit baskets. Gradually, fewer and fewer people came to visit. The fruit rotted and began to smell, while the doctors' voices grew softer and gentler every time they spoke to me. One day, my doctor asked quietly, "Lynn, is there anything you still really want to do?" In that moment, every pair of eyes around me was filled with pity. I lowered my head and stared at my hands, so thin they were nothing but bone, and thought, how can a person waste away this fast? A final wish? Aside from craving the ultimate release, there was only one thought left in my mind. I wanted to see Aiden. Even if it was just one last look. Just one. A sudden violent spasm tore through my abdomen. Cold sweat instantly soaked through my back. I clung to the edge of the wall, my nails nearly digging into the wallpaper, yet I didn't dare reach for the OxyContin in the drawer. I could only curl in on myself, riding out the wave of pain, waiting for it to slowly recede. Aiden stood just a few steps away, watching me with that same cold, suspicious gaze. My whole body was shaking. I nearly shouted at him. "You don't believe me? You think I dragged you back here with some disgusting lie?" Two stumbled to the coffee table, yanked open the drawer, and swept everything inside onto the surface in one furious motion. Medical summaries. Stacks of insurance settlement statements. Prescriptions for outrageously expensive clinical drugs. They spilled out in front of him. "Look at them. Open your eyes and look. Look carefully and tell me I'm lying." I let out a laugh that sounded almost self-destructive, tears blurring my vision. "Read those diagnosis codes, Aiden. I'm dying. This is real. I don't have much time left." At last, he lowered his head. His gaze lingered on that glaring pile of paperwork. I locked my eyes on his face, desperate to catch even the smallest crack, panic, grief, anything. But his lashes were lowered, shadows hiding his expression, his voice so low it felt like he was speaking to himself. "What do you actually want, Lynn?" My voice softened, sinking into a kind of humility I despised even as it left my mouth. "Stay with me for 3 days." My throat tightened painfully as I added, "Just 3 days. After that, I'll disappear from your life completely. I swear." We stood there in the dead silent living room, locked in place. Finally, as if he'd surrendered to the suffocating weight of it all, he let out a long, exhausted sigh.
Starting today?
At that exact moment, the rain outside stopped. A thin beam of sunlight pierced through Seattle's perpetually gray clouds and spilled into the room. The sky had cleared, as if even God were mocking my situation. I washed my face carefully in front of the mirror. The woman staring back at me had sunken eyes and a sickly wax-yellow complexion. Reflected in the corner of the mirror was the man behind me, still young, still handsome, still radiating life. Time had carved its cruelty into me alone. It wasn't fair. The one who changed his heart was the one who ended up living better. I put on my wig and brushed on some blush in a clumsy attempt to hide how ill I looked. In the mall's glass storefronts, our reflections appeared one behind the other. He walked ahead with a cold expression, keeping a polite but absolute distance between us. No closeness. No touch. I stared at our shadows on the ground as they overlapped, then drifted apart. Quietly, I reached out and pretended to take his shadow's hand. At least a shadow doesn't pull away the moment you touch it. We went to see a movie. The moment I sank into the theater seat, shards of memory came rushing back all at once. This was the same cinema where we'd had our first date. I still remembered how, when the lights dimmed that night, his warm palm, slightly damp with nervous sweat, had hesitantly reached over to hook my fingertip. Then he'd laced our fingers together, gripping tightly, as if afraid I might disappear if he let go. I hadn't even needed to turn my head to know his ears must have been burning red. Now, I cautiously slid my hand along the armrest, inching closer, trying to touch the back of his hand. He reacted as if he'd been burned. In one sharp motion, he pulled his hand away and shoved it deep into the pocket of his coat. My hand froze there, suspended awkwardly in midair. Tears fell in heavy drops, splashing onto the cold leather armrest. I couldn't stop them. On the screen, the hero and heroine were kissing passionately beneath a glowing sunset, the music swelling with a kind of romance that felt almost cruel. I was crying. And beside me, he sat in silence, rigid and unmoving, like a cold gravestone. After the movie, I took him to an old restaurant near the pier. 10 years ago, it had been where we celebrated every anniversary. I deliberately reserved our old spot by the window and ordered what used to be his favorites, the tomahawk steak and the spicy chicken wings. I set his knife and fork in place, then ordered a set for myself. He kept his gaze fixed on the shimmering ocean outside the window, making it clear he had no intention of meeting my eyes. I pretended not to notice and started talking to fill the space. I said the renovation had stripped the place of its old vintage charm, that the owner had probably changed, that prices everywhere had become outrageous. He didn't respond to a single word. Still, I kept talking. It had been too long since I'd spoken to him like this. Even if he just sat there, I wanted to pour out everything, try to cram 10 years of silence into this fragile moment. When the food arrived, still steaming, I slid the steak toward him. "Try it," I said softly. "Does it still taste the same?" He didn't even lift his eyes. "I don't eat this stuff anymore, Lynn. My tastes changed a long time ago." Something stabbed straight through my chest. I cut off a large piece of meat and stuffed it into my mouth. Chew. There was no flavor at all. It was like chewing on a piece of dry cork. When I swallowed, my throat burned as if scraped by blades. He didn't like it anymore, but I remembered. He'd forgotten that taste, while my memory stayed stuck in the past, even though I myself had already lost my sense of taste. I speared another chicken wing, thickly coated in hot sauce, and mechanically shoved it into my mouth. One bite after another. Food mixed with salty tears slid down my throat, until my stomach suddenly twisted violently. I clapped a hand over my mouth and bolted toward the restroom at the back of the restaurant. Ugh. Everything I'd just forced down came back up, mixed with sour bile. A server rushed in after me, panic written all over his face, handing me tissues and a cup of warm water. "Ma'am, are you okay? Do you need me to call an ambulance?" I was shaking, completely drained, vomiting until my legs felt weak. I shook my head desperately, apologizing between broken breaths. "I'm fine. I'm so sorry. I made a mess. I'm really, really sorry." The server was gentle, speaking to me softly the whole time, trying to calm me down. "It's okay. We'll take care of it. Don't worry. Take your time." When I finally managed to steady myself against the wall and walk back out, I realized Aiden was already standing on the restaurant's outdoor terrace. Through the thick glass, his back looked blurred by the night, distant and unreal, as if he were already halfway gone. I hurriedly paid the bill and rushed outside, terrified that if I hesitated even a second, he would disappear again.
Aiden. He turned around.
The look in his eyes was distant, appraising, as if he were measuring how much longer this had to last.
Where to next? He asked. I opened my mouth.
My throat still burned from vomiting. The bridge by the lake, I said hoarsely.
Please.
We ended up on the bridge over Lake Union. There were only a few pedestrians. Most tourists had gone to the new viewing platform nearby. I watched a cruise boat gliding slowly across the water and spoke quietly. Do you remember this place? This is where you proposed to me. He frowned, impatience seeping into his voice. That was a long time ago, Lynn.
Stop digging up the past.
He didn't want me to talk about it. That only made me want to say it more.
Our first date, I continued anyway.
We watched a movie first, the same theater as today. Then we went out for dinner. That same restaurant. You just started working back then. You saved up for so long before you were willing to take me there and order their signature dishes.
I paused, studying his profile. Was it good?
The steak tonight, did it taste the same as before?
I don't know, he said flatly. I didn't touch it. Oh, I see. I answered softly.
There probably wouldn't be another chance to eat it again anyway. A cruise ship drifted slowly beneath the bridge. I remembered the night he proposed, how he'd wrapped his arms around me and refused to let go, muttering that we should wait for the next boat to pass before leaving. We watched one ship after another glide by, until the sky had gone completely dark. A cold gust of wind swept across the bridge, and I shivered. Was the wind that night just as cold? I pointed toward a brightly lit boat in the distance. Let's go back after that one passes under the bridge. The ship moved forward little by little. Faint laughter and music drifted up from the deck.
It made me jealous.
Late that night, I jolted awake from a nightmare and instinctively ran out of the bedroom. Only when I saw the blurred figure on the living room couch did my heart finally settle.
His breathing was light and steady. I crept closer without thinking.
I wanted to touch his hair, but when my fingers were just about to reach him, fear stopped me.
I was afraid of waking him.
My hand trembled as I pulled it back. Then suddenly, a violent cramp tore through my lower abdomen.
The pain folded me in half.
I collapsed onto the floor, biting down hard on my lip, my teeth sinking into flesh.
I didn't dare make a sound. Cold sweat and tears smeared across my face. My vision slowly blurred. Aiden. It hurts so much.
Why won't you hold me again, just like you used to? When I opened my eyes again, it was already noon the next day.
The sunlight was harsh.
Aiden sat silently in the armchair by the window, watching me without saying a word.
I forced myself out of bed.
After a quick wash and some basic grooming, I took him downtown to a high-end bridal boutique. I began selecting wedding dresses, one by one, with deliberate care. Back then, we had nothing. We'd only gone to City Hall to sign the papers, no ceremony, not even a proper ring. Later, when life finally stabilized, when we bought a house and a car, just as we were preparing to make up for it all with a real wedding, everything fell apart. I lifted a strapless mermaid gown from the rack and turned to him.
Does this one look good?
He leaned against the doorway and answered perfunctorily.
Yeah.
I pointed to another dress, minimalist, satin, clean lines.
What about this one?
He looked away, his tone flat.
Whatever. Either is fine.
I lowered my head and stopped asking for his opinion. I chose the simplest silk gown in the store, then picked out a well-tailored suit. I paid on the spot and took everything with me. After that, I brought him to a private photography studio with an excellent reputation. I handed the suit to Aiden and asked him to change. He refused without hesitation.
I agreed to stay with you for 3 days, he said coldly.
That doesn't include taking these kinds of photos.
I met his eyes and asked quietly, You really won't do it?
He glanced at the clothes in my hands, his expression resolute.
No.
I withdrew the suit without another word. If he wouldn't shoot, then he wouldn't. I didn't have the strength left to argue. The makeup artist was skilled. She layered thick concealer over my sickly complexion until I finally looked somewhat alive again. But while working on my hair, she accidentally knocked my wig askew, and with it, pulled out the last few strands of my brittle, lifeless hair. She panicked instantly, her hand shaking, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry, ma'am, I really didn't mean to. I didn't use any force, I took her hand to calm her. It's okay. It's my body, not your fault. Just keep going. Make it look as natural as you can." After that, every movement she made was painfully careful. When I stepped into the studio, the photographer looked at me standing alone and asked, confused, "Where's the groom?" I glanced toward Aiden, who was standing outside the door smoking, looking as though he were waiting to watch me embarrass myself. I forced a smile. He's not feeling well. He doesn't want to be on camera. I'll shoot alone." The photographer's expression shifted instantly, awkward, sympathetic. "It's fine," I added quickly, trying to sound casual. "You can Photoshop the groom in later. I brought his photos, and I've already chosen the suit reference. I'm willing to pay double for post-production." I only shot one set of photos, but I booked the entire team for the whole day. For the rest of the time, I stayed in the editing room, standing behind a young technician as he worked on the images. I sent him Aiden's old photos and the suit references. "Please place him here," I said softly. "Make it look as natural as possible." The technician glanced at the photo, then looked back at me. "All right," he said curtly. "You're the client." I stood behind him, pointing at the screen, doing my best to reconstruct Aiden from memory. "The height isn't right. He should be around 6 feet tall. His shoulders need to be broader, he has a strong build. Don't make his skin that pale. He's always outdoors. And his face, it's a little leaner than in this photo." The technician's mouse clicks grew faster and sharper, his brow knotting tighter with every adjustment. Finally, he snapped. He slammed the mouse down on the desk. "Ma'am, you can't expect post-production to fix everything. He's literally right outside. Why can't he just come in and stand here for 2 minutes? Compositing like this is a nightmare." His tone was harsh. I glanced toward Aiden, who was sitting in the lounge area at a distance, completely detached, as if none of this concerned him. My voice dropped. "He doesn't want to." The air froze for a heartbeat. The studio owner rushed over and smacked the technician hard on the back of the head. "What's your attitude? Is that how you talk to a client?" Then he turned to me, plastering on an apologetic smile. "Ms. Lin, I'm truly sorry. He's young and doesn't know any better. Please don't take it to heart. You just tell us what you want, we'll keep adjusting until you're satisfied." The technician pressed his lips together, muttering under his breath under the boss's glare. "Fine. I'll fix it." I smiled and said it was okay. Then something else occurred to me, and I looked at the owner. "Could you also help me with one separate photo? A 12-inch print. Black and white." The technician's hand froze mid-motion. The owner's smile stiffened. "Black and white." I nodded calmly. "Yes. And please frame it with a simple black frame. Make me look nice in it." I paused, then added softly, "That photo might be used at my memorial service." I pulled out an old photo from 10 years ago and sent it to them. In it, a young woman was smiling brightly, nestled against Aiden's chest, while he looked down at her with unmistakable tenderness. I didn't look like this, back then. The technician stared at the photo, stunned. The owner smacked him on the head again. "Still got that temper? Now you get why this matters." When the technician spoke again, guilt weighed heavily in his voice. He pointed at the screen. "Ma'am, is there anything else you'd like adjusted? I can change it right now. Sharpen the facial lines a bit more? Add some color, make you look healthier." On the screen, I was wearing a pure white wedding dress, light shining in my eyes. Beside me stood Aiden, carefully composited in, tall, composed, dressed in a perfectly fitted suit. His gaze was so gentle it almost seemed to spill over. That was exactly how he'd looked at me 10 years ago. I spoke softly. "It's perfect. It looks just like us, back then. Thank you." The owner and the technician insisted on doing one final round of detailed retouching, and promised the prints would be couriered to my home first thing the next morning. In a world this cold, the kindness of strangers sometimes feels the most sincere. Since my diagnosis, it seemed as though the entire world had begun treating me gently. Everyone, except the man I loved most.
I looked up at Aiden.
He was sitting alone in the corner, head lowered, scrolling through his phone as if none of this concerned him.
My phone rang. It was my mother. Lynn. Her voice was careful, hesitant.
The hospital said, "You've already checked out?"
I answered softly that I had.
"Then, would you like to come home for a few days?" she asked.
"Your sister and your brother are both back." I agreed.
Then, almost as an afterthought, I added gently,
"Mom, I'll bring Aiden with me.
Remember to make some of the dishes he likes."
The line went dead silent.
For a long time, my mother didn't say a word. When she finally spoke again, she was stumbling over her words.
"Oh, okay. Mom understands. You, be careful on the road."
After I hung up, I turned to Aiden.
"We're having dinner at my parents' place tonight."
He leaned against the wall, half his face swallowed by the shadow of the hallway. There was a deep, instinctive resistance in his voice.
"Your parents' house? As what?" he asked. "Your ex-husband?"
"Lynn, we've been divorced for 10 years. This isn't appropriate." The crease between his brows tightened, and suddenly I was pulled back to years ago. Back then, my parents hadn't approved of him at all. The moment my mother learned he came from a blue-collar family in the Midwest, and that he had 3 brothers he was still financially supporting, she immediately started arranging blind dates for me with men from what she called better backgrounds. She used to sit me down and say, over and over, with the gravity of someone who'd lived through it,
"Lynn, I've been there.
I don't want you repeating my mistakes, growing old worrying about rent and bills."
I'd been furious. We had a massive fight. I slammed the door and walked out.
When Aiden found out, he didn't get angry.
Instead, he comforted me gently.
"Your mom isn't wrong," he said. "If I had a daughter, I'd want her to live comfortably too, not struggle alongside some broke guy."
He rubbed my hair, his gaze steady and sincere. "Don't fight with your family.
It's just that I'm not good enough yet, that's why they're worried.
But I promise you, I'll work hard.
I'll give you a life where you never have to stress over a single bill."
And he did.
He worked like a man possessed, endless overtime, 24 hours on call. In less than 5 years, he climbed his way up to technical director at a top-tier tech company.
The salary was staggering. He bought a house. He bought a car.
The property deed had only my name on it. He silenced every doubt with success, in the most conventional sense of the word. After that, my parents never objected again. In fact, he treated them with more care than I ever did, always reminding me to call home on holidays, always checking in on them.
I looked at him now and asked quietly, "My mom just turned 60.
You really don't want to go see her? You used to scold me for not caring enough about them.
You even said, 'Enough.'" He cut me off sharply.
"You just want me to go, don't you?" He let out a cold, self-mocking laugh.
"Fine. I'll go," he said. "Just don't regret it."
At last, we could go home together. I couldn't think of a single reason why I ever would. When I pushed open the familiar oak door of my parents' house, I called out,
"Dad, Mom, we're back. You're home."
My sister's voice broke the silence first. Every gaze in the room snapped toward me at once. The air seemed to freeze in that instant, leaving only the low roar of the range hood humming in the background.
"See, come sit down," she said.
My brother recovered first, his voice dry and stiff.
"Let's eat.
Everyone's been waiting for a while." I glanced back at Aiden and motioned for him to sit with me. But my brother instinctively rushed ahead and took the seat Aiden used to sit in.
I gently nudged him aside.
"Hey Kevin, leave that seat for your brother-in-law." The moment the words left my mouth, the room went dead silent.
You could have heard a pin drop.
The spoon slipped from my mother's hand and clattered loudly into her porcelain bowl. My brother jolted as if electrocuted, scrambling to cover the awkwardness, his words tumbling out too fast.
"Oh right. For Aiden. Aiden sits here."
He grabbed a bottle of red wine and moved to pour a glass for Aiden, forcing cheer into his voice.
"Come on, long time no see. Have a drink." I watched Aiden carefully. His brow was still tightly furrowed. I hurriedly reached out and stopped my brother. "He can't drink."
My brother's hand froze in midair. After half a second of stunned hesitation, he panicked and turned toward the fridge.
Tech then soda. Aiden can have soda.
I finally exhaled and looked at the spread on the table.
Everything was painfully bland. I couldn't help complaining. Mom, why is everything so light? You know Aiden likes spicy food.
You should have added some chili sauce or made something with more flavor. Before I could finish, my mother suddenly covered her face with both hands. A strangled sob leaked out through her fingers.
Why is Grandma crying?
My nephew, who had been eating quietly, looked up. His little face flushed red with anger as he pointed straight at me.
Aunt Lynn is bad. Aunt Lynn made Grandma cry. I rushed to explain. No, sweetheart.
Auntie was just saying that when we have guests, we should make food they like.
There are no guests.
His sharp voice sliced through the suffocating air. Grandma said Aunt Lynn is sick and imagining things.
There is no Uncle Aiden at all. Uncle Aiden already. Shut up.
My sister slapped him hard across the face, her complexion turning deathly pale.
What nonsense are you saying? Is this how I taught you to speak?
The child burst into tears, wailing in grievance.
I'm not lying.
Grandma said it herself. Uncle Aiden already died in that plane crash.
Wah.
We had planned it for so long, a full wedding photo shoot in the Northern Rockies, surrounded by snow-covered peaks. But right before we were supposed to leave, his tech company suddenly sent him to Asia to deal with an emergency system failure.
Again and again, it was the same story. Endless meetings. Constant business trips.
He kept canceling on me at the last minute. The gowns we had rented, the photographer we had booked, the hotel reservations, everything had to be rescheduled over and over.
I was furious. I refused to speak to him.
In the early hours before his departure, he leaned down to kiss me goodbye.
I turned my face away, cold and distant.
He sighed helplessly by the bedside. Baby, I promise I'll be back soon, he said softly. This time, I won't delay the shoot.
I swear.
I hid under the covers and mocked him like a petty, hurt child.
You say that every time, Aiden. Empty promises.
You don't care about our wedding at all. He reached in, pulled me out of the blanket, and kissed my forehead over and over, patient and gentle, lowering his voice as if calming a frightened animal.
This time is real, he said. I'll finish everything ahead of schedule. I'll take the earliest flight back.
The moment I land, I'll go straight to the studio and stay there until you're satisfied.
Okay. I snorted quietly and ignored him.
He closed the bedroom door gently and left. But I stayed wrapped in my self-righteous resentment, deliberately holding on to my anger. When he video called me, I declined every time. When he sent apology messages, I didn't reply to a single one. I even set my phone to do not disturb, nursing a dark, childish thought, let him feel what it's like to be ignored for once. To come back and make it up to me, he compressed his entire work schedule like a madman. After completing the assignment, he really did jump onto the earliest flight back to Seattle. That plane took off just after midnight. That night, my phone was still on silent. When I finally woke up the next morning, my screen was flooded with missed calls and unread messages. My heart dropped straight through my chest as I read his last few messages.
Panic swallowed me whole.
I started calling his number like a lunatic.
I'm sorry, the number you have dialed is currently out of service. Once. Twice. 10 times.
My hand shaking, I called the airline's customer service line, only to be met with an endless loop of hold music.
The line was perpetually busy. Cold sweat poured down my back. Fear rose like a tide, nearly drowning me.
My phone almost slipped from my slick palm.
Then the screen lit up. An unfamiliar international number.
I answered in a rush, my throat feeling like it had been sealed with concrete.
I forced out a trembling sound. Hello. Hello.
Is this Ms. Lynn? The voice on the other end was formal, heavy with restraint. We regret to inform you that the WH-073 flight your husband, Mr. Aiden, was on suffered a serious accident over the Pacific Ocean early this morning. Search and rescue operations are currently underway, but at this time, no survivors have been found. We will be providing follow-up psychological support and...
That's impossible. I screamed. You're lying. You're a scammer. I slammed the phone shut and hurled it onto the carpet. It had to be a scam. It had to be. There was no way. Aiden had sent me a message just hours earlier. A plane crash, something that only ever existed in the news. How could it possibly happen to him? I don't know how much time passed before there was a heavy knock at my door. 2 uniformed officers stood outside. Their expressions were rigid, almost frozen, the kind of solemn professionalism that leaves no room for misunderstanding. They looked at me and spoke in that standardized tone of condolence. "Ms. Lin, we are." In that instant, my mind went completely blank. A sharp ringing filled my ears, drowning out everything else. I was taken to a family assistance center near the airport. The crying there wasn't loud, but it was suffocating. Some people had collapsed onto the carpet, unable to move. Some covered their faces tightly with their hands. Others just stared at the white walls, motionless, like hollowed-out shells. I sat in a corner, my hands and feet so cold they felt numb, as if they no longer belonged to me. I still refused to believe it. How could something this absurd happen to me? Lin. Aiden's parents arrived from their hometown. That tough, blue-collar couple looked as if all the life had been drained out of them in a single moment. His mother clutched me and sobbed uncontrollably. His father squatted at the far end of the hallway, head buried in his hands, completely still. All I could do was pat his mother's back mechanically, my voice dry and hollow, barely sounding like my own. "Don't cry, it'll be okay, it'll be okay." I had nothing else to say. Those were the only words left to me. The airline's PR representative and the head of the family assistance team were surrounded by an angry crowd. They repeated the same emotionless answers over and over, their voices calm to the point of cruelty. "Have you found anyone? We are still doing everything we can to search. Where did the plane go down? The seabed terrain in the crash area is extremely complex. The exact coordinates are still being confirmed. Is there any hope? We cannot give a definitive answer at this time." "Then what about the bodies?" someone cried out, covering their face as they broke down. "Can you bring them back? We will make every possible effort to continue the search." It was always the same script. They never gave you hope, but they also refused to let you completely despair. Days passed. Hope dimmed a little more with each one. In the end, even the idea of recovering the bodies became an unreachable luxury. One day, I went out to buy fast food for Aiden's mother. On my way back, a hollow-eyed middle-aged man shoved a crumpled flyer into my hands. His name was Miller. On the flyer were photos of missing passengers. His voice was hoarse as he spoke to me. "They say they'll do everything they can," he said, bitter and urgent. "But do you know how big the estimated search area is? 120,000 square kilometers. And the black box signal can only last 30 days at most. Once that signal dies, they'll use excessive cost as an excuse to stop searching. This involves legal disputes over an international flight," Miller kept saying. "They just want to throw some money at us and make us go away. We have to stick together. We have to pressure Congress, force them to keep searching." I joined the family's mutual support group. I posted alongside them on social media, boosted every thread, tried desperately to keep the accident trending so it wouldn't fade from public view. We held banners outside the airline's headquarters, crying in front of cameras, telling our stories again and again until our voices went hoarse. Under mounting pressure from every direction, the search and rescue operation was extended, an exception, dragging on for half a year. It still found nothing. The airline began calling families in one by one, pushing for private settlements. "Ms. Lin, we understand your pain. But the reality is that deep-sea searches cost millions of dollars every single day. An immeasurable amount of manpower and resources has already been exhausted. Continuing for 6 months is the absolute limit of humanitarian effort. Rather than burning funds on a search with no hope, it would be more meaningful to redirect that money into compensation for the families. This is the highest level of sincerity the company can offer. We strongly urge you to consider it." The compensation offers grew larger each time. And my answer never changed. "I refuse." Notifications from the family group chat never stopped. Miller, the group leader, was always the most radical voice. Over and over, he rallied everyone in the chat. Hold the line. Do not sign anything. Our loved ones are not commodities you can buy off with a check. We want one thing only: if they're alive, we see them alive; if they're dead, we see the bodies. His words became a kind of belief system, binding us, broken people, together. In the airline's eyes, we became the most stubborn, most troublesome group they had ever dealt with. The stalemate dragged on for another 6 months. One day, after yet another negotiation collapsed with the lawyers in their tailored suits, I walked out of the conference room and went downstairs to the cafe. That's where I saw a familiar figure. Miller was sitting there, clutching a folder. The moment he saw me, panic flickered across his face. Instinctively, he tried to hide the folder behind his back. But I had already seen it. A printed settlement agreement. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Without a word, he slumped back into his chair, pulled out a pack of cigarettes, and started smoking one after another. Cigarette butts piled up at his feet. When he reached for another, he realized the pack was empty. With a sharp, frustrated motion, he crushed the box in his hand and threw it to the floor. "I'm sorry, Lynn," he said. His voice sounded like sandpaper scraping against concrete. $5 million. I've never seen that many zeros in my life. He looked up at me, his eyes bloodshot. My son, he was just a regular freight driver. Even if he risked his life on the highway every day, he only made a few thousand a month. No food, no rest, 40 years of work, working until he died. He still would never have saved $5 million. He wiped his face hard, his voice starting to break. He and his wife were going on a honeymoon to an island, he said hoarsely. That was their first time ever leaving the country. And now, all that's left are 4 old parents who still have to go on living. I have to think about the people who are still alive. What choice do I have? He couldn't continue. Both hands covered his face as his shoulders shook violently. The suffocating heat of a Seattle summer mixed with the acrid smell of smoke, stinging my eyes. I looked at the gray creeping into his temples, the way his back had curled inward, and it felt like someone had stuffed my throat with lead. I couldn't force out a single word. Later that day, he sent one final message to the family group chat. "I'm sorry, everyone. I can't hold on anymore." Then he transferred ownership of the group and left the chat. For a moment, there was a deathly silence. And then the group exploded. "Traitor. You sold out your own son for money. Are you even human? Miller, you piece of shit." The abuse flooded the screen, ugly and relentless. Miller never replied. He simply clutched the signed settlement agreement and slowly disappeared down the street, swallowed by the distance. His withdrawal triggered a chain reaction. The group's numbers began to drop at an alarming rate. 1 person left. Then 5. Then 10. At first, anyone who exited was immediately attacked. But when the original group of more than 300 shrank to fewer than 90, the shouting stopped. What remained was a bleak, suffocating quiet. Those of us still living in the same city formed a smaller group, only 9 people. Every now and then, we'd meet at some cheap bar. Even alcohol couldn't lift the shadow pressing down between our brows. "Hey, why does everyone look so miserable?" one man said, a regular who wore work clothes, his face flushed red as he raised his mug of beer. "You ever seen Cast Away? Tom Hanks survived on a deserted island. Why couldn't our loved ones? Who knows, maybe they're on some nameless island in the South Pacific right now, just waiting for us to come get them. Come on, cheers to that island." Everyone lifted their glasses, shouting loudly, almost too loudly. I couldn't tell if they were trying to convince each other, or just lying to themselves. Among the remaining 90, some people contacted international lawyers to sue the airline. Others kept submitting petitions to diplomatic offices. Some launched social media campaigns in multiple languages, begging the world not to forget WH-073. All I could do was keep sharing their posts. Over and over. Before I realized it, 5 years had passed. The official search for WH-073 had long been declared over. No matter how loudly we screamed, the world had already turned the page on this tragedy. Only we were still standing where it ended, refusing to move. There were still people in the group who clung stubbornly to the idea of a miracle. Like the older man who started live streaming wilderness survival. He went out into remote fields and forests,
demonstrating how to eat insects and dig up roots. When he stared into the camera, his eyes shone with a brightness that bordered on madness.
"See?" he said excitedly. "Even an old man like me can survive on this. My son will be fine. He has to be."
His live stream barely had any viewers. Most of them were just there to mock him behind their screens. There was also an elderly couple who recharged their son's phone number every single month, without fail. The old woman left voice messages in his voicemail. Just in case he drifts somewhere with signal," she said softly. "We can't let him be unable to make a call." I was doing the same thing. No matter what, I kept recharging Aiden's phone. I believed he was still alive. He was too intelligent, too strong, too exceptional. How could God possibly be so cruel as to let his life end so casually, swallowed by the deep sea? After another family gathering ended, I walked alone beneath the streetlights, my shadow stretched long across the pavement.
"Ms. Lin." A voice called out to me.
It was the airline's customer liaison assigned to my case, a woman who had worked at the Seattle office for many years.
I ignored her and quickened my pace.
She jogged after me, her tone gentle in a way that felt almost merciless.
"It's been 5 years, Ms. Lin.
Even the International Maritime Tribunal has ruled that further search operations are no longer required.
I understand how you feel, but life has to go on.
Look at the families who signed the settlement agreements," she continued calmly.
"They've all started new lives. Some moved away. Some had a second child. Some even traveled to Europe together. They're doing very well. Why keep holding on to an ending that can't be undone?" "Enough."
I cut her off sharply, my throat burning.
"I won't sign."
"Ms. Lin," she said quietly, "I know money isn't an issue for you. But have you thought about Aiden's parents?" That single sentence struck precisely where it hurt the most. When I got home, I found Aiden's parents sitting in the living room with my own. Aiden's mother, who had always been so strong, spoke first.
"Lin, it's been 5 years. We've accepted it."
Her cloudy eyes, dulled by years of labor, looked at me with something close to a plea.
"Aiden is gone. We're in pain more than anyone. But life still has to go on."
She didn't finish the sentence. I already knew the reality she couldn't bring herself to say out loud. Aiden's youngest brother was getting married, and the family desperately needed money for a down payment. His parents were aging, and their blue-collar pensions were nowhere near enough to cover daily expenses. They hadn't just lost their eldest son, they had lost the support they'd counted on for their old age. My mother wrapped an arm around my shoulders, her voice trembling with tears.
"Lin, you're still so young. If Aiden knew, he would want you to move forward too.
He wouldn't want you wasting away in a house full of memories, slowly withering like this." The room echoed with the sound of my stifled sobs.
"Aiden, what am I supposed to do? If you can hear me, please, tell me the answer."
I locked myself inside the house for several days and missed the weekend gathering we'd planned. Later, I found myself sitting on a bench in a small community park not far from home, staring into nothing.
"Lin."
It was Mr. Harrison from the group. He slowly sat down beside me and asked softly,
"Why didn't you come to the gathering today?"
I lowered my head, afraid to meet his eyes. Mr. Harrison used to bring his son to this park to skateboard. Since the accident, his retired life had narrowed down to sitting on this bench, day after day. He once told me that sitting on his son's turf made him feel a little closer to him. He had also said firmly that if he ever signed that document acknowledging his son's death, took that blood money, he would never again have the face to sit here.
My nose burned.
My voice trembled as I asked, "Mr. Harrison, if I sign it, will you all look down on me?" He was silent for a long time, watching the noisy children at the skate park in the distance.
"How could we?" he finally said, his voice as light as a sigh. "This is everyone's own choice. You're still so young. You have a long road ahead of you.
We old folks aren't the same, money doesn't mean much to us anymore.
You should go live the life that belongs to you."
He kept comforting me, telling me to try to let go. But when I stood up to leave and glanced back, I saw him move to another bench, the one his son used to like the most. Even the most stubborn Mr. Harrison was telling me to move forward.
My family was the same. One after another, they tried to persuade me.
They asked if I really planned to mourn a 5-year relationship for the rest of my life. They asked why, when even his own parents had agreed, I was still standing my ground like this. They didn't understand. The weight of this love couldn't be measured in years. In my family, I was always the overlooked middle child. My parents' attention naturally gravitated toward my accomplished older sister and my doted-on younger brother. When we were younger and money was tight, only my brother's birthday was celebrated properly. My sister's and mine were usually folded into his celebrations. I never had a birthday cake that was entirely mine, whole, complete, just for me. By the time our family became better off, I had already learned how to be understanding, how to stay quiet. The first and only complete birthday cake I ever received was bought by Aiden. A small mango cake. That was the first time in my life I felt that, in this world, I was being loved deeply, as an individual, not as an afterthought. In front of others, I might have been reserved. But with Aiden, I was my truest self, loud, playful, unguarded. That was why I couldn't let go. But I really couldn't hold on anymore. When I signed my name, my hand wouldn't stop shaking. The text of the agreement blurred into a dark smear before my eyes. In the family group chat, I left just one line. "I'm sorry." Then I left the group chat. Tears splashed onto my phone screen, blurring the very place that had once been my entire emotional lifeline. After that, I lived like a walking corpse. I was afraid to think about Aiden. I was terrified that somewhere in the freezing depths of the ocean, he was blaming me for betraying our vows. On Thanksgiving, I went to visit Aiden's parents. Before I even stepped into the yard, I heard laughter spilling out of the house. The whole family was gathered for a baby shower, lively, joyful, as if the plane crash had never happened at all. The moment I appeared, the atmosphere froze. Awkwardly, I set down the gift, mumbled a few congratulations, and tried to leave as quickly as possible. Aiden's mother stopped me and pressed a large check into my hand. Her eyes were red. With great effort, she said, "Lynn, you're a good girl. Don't let people like us, who belong to the past, hold you back anymore. From now on, you don't need to come here specially. Go live your own life." Clutching that heavy check, I fled. After returning to Seattle, I tried to pull myself together. I found a new job and forced myself to drown in work every day. Under my mother's arrangement, I even tried meeting new men. There was a man named Mark who pursued me persistently. He was gentle, attentive. With everyone encouraging us, I tried dating him. Fine dining, walks by the pier, all the things people said were supposed to help you move on. On my birthday, he showed up holding a small mango cake. "I passed a dessert shop earlier," he said with a smile. "I noticed you staring at this one for a long time, so I bought it. Happy birthday, Lynn." In that instant, every layer of pretense shattered. I broke down in front of him and cried. I couldn't forget. I truly couldn't forget. Aiden's room back in his hometown had already been turned into a nursery. His personal belongings were shoved into the attic. His traces were being deliberately erased, piece by piece. If even I chose to forget him, then he would truly vanish from this world, completely. I declined Mark's second invitation. I opened my laptop and wrote a long post titled, "Please don't stop looking for me, I am WH073. I wrote about the plane crash that had taken my soul. I wrote about the years spent teetering between hope and despair. I wrote about the helplessness and agony of being forced to sign my name. Slowly, the post began to gain traction. I started running the account seriously, helping the families who were still holding on to speak out. WH073 remained an unsolved mystery in the history of human aviation, and that sense of the unknown once again drew public attention. Searching for the truth climbed the trending charts. Even international oceanographic research organizations expressed willingness to offer limited technical support for deep-sea exploration. One evening on my way home, I was stopped by Mr. Harrison. 2 years had passed since we last saw each other. The moment I saw him, I instinctively apologized. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harrison. I signed it. He patted my shoulder, his eyes filled with gentle understanding. "It's okay," he said softly. "We all understand." They added me back into that group. And I held on like that for 3 more years, until I was diagnosed with terminal cancer. After the diagnosis, I no longer had the strength to keep running the WH073 account. I transferred all administrative control to a young man I'd met in the group, someone just as obsessed with uncovering the truth. The old members wanted to start a fundraiser to help cover my medical expenses, but I refused. I didn't let them come see me either. They had already endured too many heartbreaks in this lifetime. I didn't want them to suffer the pain of losing another friend. To be honest, the moment I held that diagnosis in my hands, I felt a strange sense of relief. Before Aiden left, he told me to live well. For 10 years, I truly had tried to keep that promise. I had never once thought about ending my life on my own. But now, if God had decided to take me, this wasn't me breaking my word. I wanted to go find him. But I still didn't know where he was. The official search had completely stopped 3 years ago. Now it was the 10th year. Even the plane's last known coordinates had become an unsolved mystery. Being sick hurts. God seemed especially cruel to me. He took Aiden away from my side first, and now he was determined to torment my body again and again in whatever time I had left. In pain so severe it could shatter a person's will, I began to see Aiden often. When I saw him, I felt a peace I had never known before. And yet, I was afraid. I started refusing the painkillers the doctors prescribed, because I was terrified the drowsiness would make him disappear. I stayed fully conscious, enduring the tearing agony, just so I could look at him a little longer. But the pain was too much. My mind began to fracture. In certain delirious moments, I even forgot about the plane crash. I thought he had truly betrayed our marriage. I thought that bastard had disappeared for 10 whole years because he'd fallen out of love. If he were really here, he would have held me like before, kissed my forehead, and scolded me helplessly. Lynn, how could you think of me as someone that terrible? But didn't he leave me alone to face all of this? Wasn't that terrible too? I wiped my tears away, straightened my messy hair and wrinkled pajamas, and opened the door to face my parents waiting in the living room. Dad. Mom. I'm sorry, I scared you just now. I forced a smile that I hoped still looked presentable. I stopped taking my meds these past few days, so my head's been a little muddled. I said a lot of crazy things. I'm clear-headed now. My mother's eyes instantly turned red. She bit her lip hard and nodded again and again. As long as you're clear-headed, that's good, that's good. My brother Kevin immediately jumped in, exaggerating his cheerfulness to lighten the mood. I told you my sister's not that fragile. Come on, dinner's still warm, I'm starving. The next afternoon, I saw my little nephew crouched in the hallway, his bottom stuck up in the air as he concentrated on his Lego blocks. I squatted down and gently patted his head. Are you still mad at your aunt? He snorted, his small face tightened into a pout. You got me scolded by Mom yesterday. My butt still hurts. I couldn't help laughing. Then how about Auntie takes you to the supermarket and buys you your favorite snacks as compensation? His eyes lit up instantly. He grabbed my hand and dragged me straight toward the door. At the supermarket, his arms were piled high with chocolate bars and cheese sticks, grinning so wide you could see every tooth. I asked him, smiling. So, have you forgiven Auntie now? Of course I forgive you, he announced loudly. Then he carefully picked out 2 of his most treasured chocolate bars from the pile and handed them to me. Lowering his voice, he leaned close to my ear. One for you. One for Uncle Aiden. He blinked his big eyes at me, clearly puzzled. Can you give it to him for me? Even though I still can't see where he is. My eyes burned instantly. My throat tightened so hard I could barely speak. He doesn't eat sweets, I said softly. Auntie will thank you for him, and I'll eat it for him, okay? He drooped a little, disappointed. Oh, okay. Then what does Uncle Aiden like to eat? You tell me next time, and I'll have Mom prepare it in advance. I swallowed back my tears and touched his cheek. Okay. Kevin drove me to the train station to head back to Seattle. We didn't speak much on the way. Just before we arrived, I asked quietly, You and your girlfriend, are you close to settling down? He scratched the back of his head, a little embarrassed. Not that fast. We want to save up some more first. I watched the scenery blur past the window and said softly, I see, that's a shame. I guess. I probably won't be around to see that day. Kevin slammed on the brakes.
Panic filled his voice. Lynn.
If you say something like that again, I'm turning this car around and taking you straight home. If you want to see it that badly, I'll drag her to City Hall tomorrow and get married.
I laughed and punched his arm lightly. Don't be ridiculous. Marriage isn't a joke.
The car started moving again. I looked at the tense line of Kevin's profile and spoke quietly.
In the future,
Mom and Dad will be counting on you. He didn't turn around. He just let out a heavy mm. But I saw the corners of his eyes turn completely red. When I returned to my Seattle apartment, the composited wedding photo had already arrived, leaning against the door.
I unwrapped it and studied the image carefully. We looked beautiful.
I carried the heavy frame around the living room, comparing spots, and finally placed it squarely in the center above the fireplace. After admiring it for a while, I went into the bathroom and ran a hot bath. As I sank into the warm water, the pain that had tormented me for months seemed to disappear, almost miraculously.
I changed into the pure white silk wedding dress.
The waist hung loose now, empty from how much weight I'd lost. I stood in front of the full-length mirror and slowly turned in a circle.
For a moment, I saw Aiden again.
He was wearing the tailored suit I had chosen for him, leaning casually against the bedroom door frame.
His posture was relaxed, elegant.
His eyes were gentle, so gentle it felt as if he had never left, as if these 10 years had never existed at all.
Looking at him in the mirror, I asked softly, "Do I look okay?"
He walked over and stood behind me, his arms hovering around my shoulders, not quite touching, yet close enough to feel.
"You look beautiful," he said. "You always do."
The speakers began playing that familiar melody on their own, the same music we'd used years ago when we filmed our little love video in Yellowstone.
I reached out my hand. He took it steadily. His other arm wrapped around my waist.
I rose onto my toes and followed the rhythm, stepping into the dance.
"Aiden, have I gotten old?" "Not at all." "You're lying."
We began to turn. The hem of the wedding dress bloomed like a white rose, unfurling again and again across the living room floor.
"When you were on that plane," I asked quietly, "were you scared?"
"I was."
"What were you afraid of?"
"That you would be sad for the rest of your life."
Round and round we spun.
In this moment, the pain was gone. The loneliness of 10 years was gone.
It felt like going back in time.
I could feel his nervousness, the faint dampness in his palms, the way he held my waist just a little too tightly, afraid I might fall.
Exactly like before.
I closed my eyes and danced this final dance, guided by the echoes of memory. When the music finally faded, my strength left me. I clutched his suit jacket, pressed my face deep into the fabric, breathing him in.
Smiling, I whispered, "Aiden, I'm coming to you.
This is my final note to my family. I am wearing a vital signs monitoring bracelet. When my heart stops, the system will automatically send you an email notification. Please don't worry, I've taken care of everything. All assets under my name have been divided into 3 parts.
One for my parents. One for Aiden's parents.
And the final portion donated to the WH073 International Search Foundation. My memorial photo is on the mantle, the most recent one.
Please keep the funeral simple. Don't let anyone grieve too deeply for me. I'm not gone forever.
I've just gone on a long trip to find the love who's been lost for 10 years.
I've already bathed, and I'm wearing my favorite white dress.
Please don't let strangers handle my body any further. Remember to place the suit I bought and the wedding photo from the living room into my coffin.
I want to take them with me.
After cremation, scatter my ashes over the sea where Aiden disappeared. If the exact coordinates can't be confirmed, then find a deep blue stretch of ocean and let the wind carry me.
Currents circle endlessly. The tides always return. We will meet again. The end.